It's time for our Bible story today, and we're going to do kind of a couple of stories together today. Now, we talked about Israel, so I drew Israel up here. Remember, we have the Sea of Galilee up here, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, the Mediterranean Sea's over here. There's some mountains here. Jerusalem, which is the capital where King Solomon lived and King David. Jerusalem's actually called the City of David. It's kind of a nickname because that's where David built his palace and where he was king. And then all the kings from then on went there too. So that's also in Jerusalem where Solomon built the temple for God. So remember, we have different promises that God gave throughout, right? He promised like to Abraham that he would make his name great and make him a blessing, and he would give him as many kids as the stars in the sky and the sand in the seashore. Or we talked about how with Jacob, God promised to also make him a blessing and to be with him and to bring him back to this land, right? So we had different promises that we've done with each of the different people that we've talked about. God always makes different promises. Well, for David, remember, one of the promises was that somebody in his family would be king on the throne all the time, right? And we know now that that's Jesus, right? Jesus is on the throne in heaven, and Jesus is from David's family. But there was that promise to David. So remember, when David died, Solomon became king, and at first he was really, really, really good. He did all these great things, built the temple, did all these good things. But then remember our last lesson where Solomon, we said, no, Solomon, don't do that, right? He did some bad things, right? He made the people work super hard to pay him more money in taxes. He married over 500 wives, and then he built temples to their gods and to idols, and then he worshiped in those temples. Horrible, right? We do not want any of those things. But God was keeping his promise. But to Solomon, that he would still be king, but that made God very sad, right? So there was one Solomon died. He just got old and died. His son, called Rehoboam was going to be the next king. Okay, he's the next king. He's Solomon's son. And there was an advisor named Jeroboam. All right, so their names kind of rhyme, right? Rehoboam and Jeroboam. So Rehoboam was the king, and the people came to Rehoboam when after King Solomon died, when Rehoboam was king, the people came and they said, King Rehoboam, your dad, he is really rich, but he made us work even harder. He made us pay more money in taxes. He made us do all these things for him, and we're hoping that you as a king, that you will lessen some of that you will take down some of those taxes, that you'll not make us do some of the work for you, that we can just do our own work, and that you will be a better king. So Rehoboam said, Jeroboam and all the people, let me think about that, and I'll come back to you in a couple of days. So Rehoboam went, and he went to his advisors who were older and more kind of experienced, the ones who had advised his dad, and he said, what do you guys think I should do? And they said, well, we think that you should listen to the people, that you should lower the amount of taxes that you're making them pay, because you already have enough money. You don't need them to give you all their money. And you should not make them all work to build you more palaces and more temples and things. Let them just do their own work. Don't add to it. So Rehoboam said, okay. Then he said to his friends, his young friends, and he said, what do you guys think I should do? These old guys think I should listen to the people. What do you think? And his friend said, no way, you should tell the people, you think my dad made you work hard, I'm going to make you work even harder. You think my dad had you pay more money in taxes, I'm going to have you pay even more money to me. Now, who do you think Rehoboam should listen to? The older men who knew more and said we should not charge as much money and we should listen to the people, or his younger friends who said, make them work harder? probably should listen to people who have more experience, right? And who know more, but he didn't. He listened to his friends. And he came back after a couple days and he said to Jeroboam, okay, and all the people, he said, okay, here's what I decided. You think my dad made you work hard? I'm going to make you work even harder. You think that my dad had you pay a lot of money to him? You are going to have to pay me even more of your money. And that's just the way it is. Well, that's not just the way it is. In fact, the people rebelled. That means they've said, no, this is not okay. And it caused the country to split into two. Now, this was what happened because of Solomon's sins, right? This is kind of part of that. So it split into two parts. And it looks like they're equal, but really this down here is a lot of desert down here, so there's not many people that live down this part. So they called the top part, there was 10 tribes here. Remember, there's 12 tribes altogether. So 10 of the tribes were up here, and they still call themselves Israel. And then okay, if there's 12 and 10 are up top, how many are left? Just 2, right? 2 tribes were down here in the southern part. And they call themselves Judah because it was the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, the little tribe of Benjamin. So there were less people here. This was there's only 2 tribes, and there are more of them up here. So Rehoboam was in charge of this southern section of Judah. In fact, that's where we get the word Jews. Sometimes Israelites are called the Jews. That comes from the word Judah, okay? So Rehoboam was king here, but up in Israel, they made Jeroboam their king up here. So he was not Solomon's family at all, but he becomes king of this northern tribes. So Israel is split into 2. Rehoboam did make the people of Judah and Benjamin, these 2 tribes, pay a lot more money in taxes. They did make them work really hard for him. Jeroboam was a good king up here, but he did something not so good. So remember where I said the temple was? In Jerusalem, right? And is Jerusalem in the northern part or the southern part? The southern part. It's in Judah. Now, what happened was all these tribes that are up here, Jeroboam started worrying. God said you could only worship him at the temple. But to go to the temple, all the Israelites up here would have to go down into Judah to Jerusalem. And he said, that's not a good thing. I got to figure out a way that we could do something different. So Jeroboam decided to make a new place to worship, some altars up here. He decided to make some altars up in the northern part, up in Israel, so that the people didn't have to go down into Judah, into Jerusalem to worship. So he did that, but he didn't ask God about it. He didn't ask God if that was okay. He just said, I'm going to do it because I'm worried about it. Now, we should always ask God about things. And if it was a rule God made of worshiping only at the temple, then this probably wasn't good that he built an altar up there, right? And then he did something even worse. He built a statue of a golden calf up there by the altar. Now, he built it because he said, I want you to have something to look at and something to bow down to. But what's rule number 1? Commandment number 1. There's only one God. What's 2? 2 gods is too many. Don't bow down to idols. So even though the statue, you said you're still worshiping God, you're just looking at this and bowing down to this cow, that wasn't okay with God, right? So that wasn't a good choice that Jeroboam made, was it? So I'm going to tell you that there's going to be a lot of different kings of Israel and a lot of different kings of Judah. And next time we're going to talk about one of these kings. We're going to talk about one of the kings of Israel next time that comes after Jeroboam does. All right, but know that Israel now is divided into two. The northern part of Israel, the southern part of Judah. All right, and that is going to become important in the next little bit.